I never thought a simple beauty procedure would change my life forever. I had done it before. Nothing too invasive, just small touch-ups here and there. I always told myself it was about self-care, that it made me feel more confident, that it was harmless. But I had no idea that on that day I would cross a line that separates life from death and come back carrying something no one could explain. It started as a regular morning. I woke up early, had my coffee, and checked my messages. There was nothing unusual about the air that day. No warnings, no signs. My appointment was scheduled for 11:30 a.m. in a clinic I trusted, with professionals I had seen multiple times. I didn't tell many people I was going. Only my best friend knew. We joked about it the night before, texting memes and laughing about how beauty is pain. None of us had a clue how prophetic that would turn out to be. I remember lying on the table, staring at the ceiling. The light above me was bright, almost too bright, but I didn't complain. I've always been the kind of person who avoids drama, who stays composed. The doctor greeted me, made a few notes, and then the procedure began. It was supposed to take 30 minutes, just a quick application of anesthesia, a few minor adjustments, and done. But something went wrong, horribly wrong. I didn't feel the exact moment when my heart stopped. I didn't feel pain, I didn't hear panic, everything just faded, like a dimmer switch turning down the world. The lights, the voices, the room, all of it dissolved into silence. And then something else began. At first it felt like floating, as if I were weightless, rising gently above myself. I looked down, and to my absolute disbelief, I saw me. My body, pale and still, my mouth slightly open, people running, hands pressing, shouting, someone crying, a nurse pushing a button with trembling fingers. But I felt nothing, no fear, no attachment, just curiosity, peace. I remember thinking, so this is what it's like to die. Then, as if pulled by an invisible thread, I began moving, not flying exactly, but being drawn, like I was being called. The room stretched and melted into light, a soft, golden light that didn't come from any sun I've ever known. It had warmth, yes, but also love, a kind of love that doesn't exist in our world, complete, pure, overwhelming. I passed through memories, real ones, childhood laughter, my mother brushing my hair, my first heartbreak. The moment I held my son for the first time, they all rushed past me like whispers on the wind, full of color, sound, scent, but none of them held me back. Then the light became a place. I can't describe it fully because I don't think any language could. It wasn't a place the way Earth has places. There were no walls, no sky, but there was presence. A presence so real, so alive, that my soul trembled. I felt naked and seen, but not judged. Everything I had ever hidden, every thought I'd suppressed, was known here. And still, I was loved. And then I saw him, my father. He died when I was 17. A sudden heart attack. He was my protector, my anchor. Losing him was the first time I truly understood what grief meant. But there he was, whole, radiant, smiling like he used to in those quiet Sunday mornings when we'd have breakfast and talk about nothing. He didn't speak at first. He just looked at me, and somehow I knew what he was saying. His eyes told me everything. You are not done. It's not your time. I felt something inside me break. I wanted to stay. The peace, the love, the reunion. It felt like home in a way that no house on earth ever had. I asked him, maybe not with words, but with whatever we use on that side, why did I have to go back? I begged him, please, let me stay. I'm so tired. I don't want to go back to the noise, the pain, the confusion. And then he said it, not with his mouth, but directly into my soul, because someone still needs you. You made a promise before you were born. You said yes, and now it's time to remember. Those words, they changed everything. Suddenly, I remembered things I had forgotten my entire life. A purpose, a mission, faces I hadn't met yet but recognized, lives I had agreed to touch and love. So much love I still hadn't given. Then he took my hand, and in that moment, the light began to dim. Not because it was fading, but because I was... My father whispered something, so soft, so sacred. I still carry it in my heart and have never told anyone. And then, just as quickly as I had left, I was being pulled back. And that was when the pain returned, a fire in my chest, a weight on my body, voices screaming, machines beeping, a sharp electric shock that felt like I had been struck by lightning, and then breath, violent, gasping, painful breath. I was back, inside this body, this fragile, limited shell that now felt like a prison. I had died for 7 minutes. 7 minutes. That's what they told me later. 7 minutes without a heartbeat. 7 minutes when I was clinically dead. But those 7 minutes, they felt like an eternity, and somehow not long enough. The room was spinning when I came back. My ears were ringing, my limbs numb, but there was movement. People rushing around me, someone crying, others yelling orders. I could barely open my eyes, but when I did, I saw the nurse who had been holding my wrist. Her face was pale, and tears streamed down her cheeks. I wanted to tell her it was okay. I wanted to say, I saw something beautiful. But my throat was raw, and all I could do was blink. The days that followed were a blur of hospital rooms, tests, doctors with concerned faces trying to explain what had happened without really understanding it. Cardiac arrest, they said. An adverse reaction. Something about my blood pressure crashing. But no one could explain me. No one could explain what I now carried inside me. Because I hadn't just come back, I had brought something with me. The silence of that realm, the warmth of that presence, the eyes of my father, his words, that feeling of unconditional love, like I had touched the very heartbeat of the universe itself, and now, nothing on earth felt the same. I stayed quiet for a while. People around me were too focused on my recovery, the drama of it all, the miracle of surviving. Everyone kept saying I was lucky, but I didn't feel lucky. I felt split, like my soul was still halfway there. I would wake up in the middle of the night with the sensation of floating. I would stare at the ceiling and hear echoes, words that weren't mine but carried meaning. I began to see patterns in things, like the universe was trying to speak. And for the first time in my life, I started to really listen. A few weeks after I was discharged, I went to visit my mother. She had aged so much in those days I was gone. She had cried herself sick, and when I saw her, her hands trembled when she hugged me. I held her close, and for the first time I told her about what happened. She didn't say a word. She just looked at me, eyes wide and glistening, and whispered, "You saw him, didn't you?" And I nodded. She broke down crying, not out of sadness but relief. She had prayed, begged for a sign, anything to tell her my father was still somewhere, that he still loved us. And I was that answer. That night, I lay in bed, eyes wide open, remembering the last thing my father had told me before I came back. There are people who will need to hear your voice, people whose pain will match your own. You will be the bridge. At the time, I didn't understand. But slowly, painfully, life began showing me. A woman from the hospital cleaning staff stopped me one day, shy and nervous. She said, "I saw you when you came back. I've never seen anyone with eyes like yours. You looked like you had seen heaven." I hadn't spoken to her. I didn't even know her name, but she had felt something. Strangers began sharing their losses with me, on buses, in waiting rooms, at cafes, as if they saw something in me they couldn't name but trusted. I became a magnet for stories, pain, healing, and every time someone poured out their grief, I listened. I held their hand, and inside, I would remember my father's words, "Be the bridge." I began writing in secret, journaling what I saw, what I felt, the dreams I kept having of the in-between. Not nightmares, not even dreams, more like visits, each one vivid, detailed, and strangely consistent. In one of them, I saw a field of white flowers that hummed like music. In another, I stood in front of a vast river made of light, where souls floated peacefully, waiting. I would wake up with tears on my face, not from fear, but from longing. a longing that still lingers in my chest like a soft ache. Then came the day everything shifted. I was invited to speak at a small community event. It wasn't about near-death experiences. It was just a wellness circle for women. And the host had heard from a friend that I had been through something. I was hesitant, scared even, but something in me said, "Now, speak now." So I did. With trembling hands and a voice that cracked halfway through, I told my story, not the medical part, the real part, the moment I floated, the light, the place, the presence, my father, his words, the return. When I finished, the room was silent. Then someone sobbed, then another, and soon, every woman in that room was crying, and not out of sadness. It was like they had been waiting for permission to feel something they had buried for too long. Afterward, one woman approached me and said, "I lost my daughter last year. I haven't been able to breathe since. But tonight, something lifted. I feel like maybe she's okay. Maybe I'll see her again." And that's when I knew. This was the promise I made before I was born. This was the reason I had to come back. It wasn't to be perfect, or to impress anyone, or even to do great things. It was to remind people that there is more, that love doesn't die, that we are more than our scars, our losses, our skin and bones, because I had touched the other side, and once you do, nothing is ever the same. Life didn't magically get easier after my return. If anything, it became heavier, because now I carried a truth so deep, so sacred, that I struggled to find the words for it in this world. Friends drifted away. Some said I had changed, and they were right. I had. How could I not? Once you've looked beyond the veil, once you've stood in the presence of that light, once you've felt the kind of love that doesn't need language, everything changes. Your priorities shift. Your fears dissolve. You no longer chase the same things. I stopped caring about appearances, about chasing perfection. The very procedure that took me to death, I never finished it. I never returned for follow-ups. The mirror no longer had power over me. My beauty wasn't in my face anymore, it was in my soul, and I finally saw that. But with this transformation came loneliness. Because how do you tell people you died, floated above your body, met your dead father, and made a soul promise and without sounding insane? So, for a long time, I walked in silence, until one night I had another dream. But this one wasn't peaceful. I was in a hallway, dark, narrow, endless, and voices echoed all around me. Whispers of people who had not found peace, who had crossed over but hadn't let go. I couldn't see them, but I felt their pain, their confusion, their regret. It wrapped around me like cold fog. I cried out for help, and then, just like that, my father appeared again. He didn't speak, but his presence calmed the entire space. The voices quieted, the cold faded, and I remembered something he had told me before I returned to Earth. You won't just be a bridge, you'll be a lantern. That night, I woke up with a purpose burning in my chest. I had to stop hiding, so I did. I began to speak more openly. I created a space where people could share their stories too, grief, loss, glimpses of the beyond. And they came, dozens, then hundreds, messages from strangers, letters from the grieving, videos from people who had died and returned like me. We were all carrying the same secret. Love doesn't end. Death is not the end. And there is something waiting for all of us that is more beautiful than words can hold. I've spoken at hospitals, hospice centers, churches. I've held the hands of mothers who lost babies, of veterans haunted by what they saw, of young people afraid of dying. And each time, I tell them, you are known, you are loved, and you are never, ever alone. I still miss him, my father. There are days I look up at the sky and ask him, how am I doing? And sometimes, I feel the warmth of that light again, brushing against my skin like a breeze that no one else can feel. I know he's there, and I know he'll be waiting when my time finally comes. For real. But until then, I walk here, not as the same woman I was, but as someone reborn. Death didn't take me. It reminded me of who I am, of why I came, of what matters. So if you ever wonder whether there is something after all of this, I can tell you, without doubt, without fear, there is, and it is more beautiful than anything this world could offer. I didn't just survive. I returned, and I remember everything, based on a true story.